The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of our penthouse apartment with a sound that seemed to echo through my very soul. There, on Marcus's laptop screen, was the Facebook post that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. A radiant photo of my husband of 7 years, resplendent in his graduation cap and gown, his arm wrapped possessively around a stunning brunette in a shimmering silver dress. The caption read, "Dr. Marcus Chen celebrates his MD with the love of his life, Isabella Rodriguez. What a perfect graduation ball. New beginnings, power couple, dreams come true, the love of his life, not me, Ava Thompson Chen, the woman who had sacrificed everything to put him through medical school, not the wife who had worked 3 jobs, sold her grandmother's jewelry, and emptied her trust fund to pay his tuition. The love of his life was apparently this Isabella, whose perfect smile seemed to mock me through the screen. My legs buckled, and I found myself sitting among the crystal shards, my designer dress, the one I'd bought to surprise him at his graduation ceremony that I was apparently not invited to, now stained with Dom Perignon and my own tears. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been planning to surprise him tonight. I had prepared everything, the champagne, his favorite dinner, and most importantly, the news that would change our future forever. But Marcus had beaten me to the surprise. I forced myself to read the comments beneath the photo, each one a fresh wound. "You two are perfect together. About time Marcus found someone who matches his success. Isabella is so lucky to have such an accomplished man." The worst part was seeing comments from people I knew, our friends, his classmates, people who had watched me support him through every grueling year of medical school. They were congratulating him on his new love, as if I had never existed. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Marcus." My hands shook as I opened it. "Ava, we need to talk when I get home tomorrow. Things have changed. I've changed. I'm sorry. Sorry. 7 years of my life, and he was sorry." I looked around our apartment, the apartment I had furnished with my savings while he studied, the apartment where I had spent countless nights alone while he was at the hospital or studying with classmates. Every piece of furniture, every carefully chosen decoration, every photograph of our supposedly happy life together suddenly felt like evidence of my own stupidity. But as I sat there among the broken glass, something unexpected happened. The initial shock began to transform into something else, something cold and sharp and infinitely more dangerous than heartbreak. Because Marcus didn't know about the private investigator I'd hired 3 months ago when I first suspected something was wrong. He didn't know about the evidence I'd gathered, the financial records I'd uncovered, or the connections I'd made. Most importantly, he didn't know about the surprise I had prepared for his graduation, a surprise that was going to happen whether he wanted it or not, a surprise that would indeed become news across the entire city, just not in the way he might have hoped. I stood up carefully, my bare feet avoiding the glass shards, and walked to my desk. From the locked drawer, I pulled out a thick manila folder labeled Marcus Chen, Investigation Results. I had hoped never to need it, had prayed that my suspicions were wrong. But as I opened the folder and saw the photographs, the bank statements, the phone records, I realized that his betrayal ran far deeper than just another woman. Marcus thought he was so clever, thought he could discard me now that he had his medical degree and his new life planned out. He thought I was just the naive wife who had outlived her usefulness. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had memorized but hoped never to use. "Richard? It's Ava Chen. Are we still on for tomorrow morning?" "Good. And Richard? Make sure the press is there. All of them." The game had begun, and Marcus had just played his last card without knowing it. The rain was falling in sheets that Tuesday evening in October, and I was running late for my shift at the university library. My umbrella had turned inside out in the wind, leaving me soaked and frustrated as I rushed through the entrance of the medical building. That's when I literally collided with him, Marcus Chen, though I didn't know his name then. All I knew was that he was tall, handsome, and now covered in coffee from the cup that had been in my hand. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I gasped, looking at his now stained white lab coat. Instead of the anger I expected, he laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made my heart skip. "Don't worry about it. I've got about 6 of these coats, and coffee stains are practically a badge of honor in med school." His eyes, dark and kind, crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Though I have to say, this is the most interesting way anyone's ever introduced themselves to me. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I'm Ava Thompson, and I really am sorry about the coffee. Can I buy you another one, or pay for dry cleaning?" "I'm Marcus," he said, extending a hand that I noticed was both strong and gentle. "And I'll take you up on that coffee, but only if you let me walk you wherever you were rushing to. It's nasty weather out there." That's how it started, with spilled coffee and an act of kindness on a rainy Tuesday. He walked me to the library, and we talked the entire way about everything and nothing. I learned he was in his second year of medical school, specializing in cardiothoracic surgery. He learned I was working on my master's degree in art history while working 3 part-time jobs to pay for school. 3 jobs? He asked, clearly impressed. That's incredible. What do you do? Library assistant, tutoring, and I wait tables at Romano's on weekends, I said, trying not to sound as exhausted as I felt. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. That's not just not glamorous. That's heroic, he said seriously. You're putting yourself through graduate school entirely on your own. That takes real courage. No one had ever called me heroic before. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 19, leaving me with a small trust fund that had gotten me through undergrad but wasn't enough for graduate school. I was used to people seeing my situation as tragic or pitiable, not admirable. Our coffee date the next day turned into dinner the following week, which turned into study sessions where he would review anatomy while I worked on my thesis about Renaissance art. Marcus was different from any man I'd ever met. He was driven, but not arrogant, ambitious, but not selfish. He talked about his dreams of becoming a surgeon with the same passion I felt about art, and he listened, really listened, when I talked about my research. You know what I love about you, he said one evening about 3 months after we met. We were in his tiny studio apartment, sharing takeout Chinese food while he studied for an exam. My ability to explain why Caravaggio's use of chiaroscuro revolutionized Baroque painting? I teased. He laughed and pulled me closer on his cramped couch. Well, that too. But I love that you understand what it means to work for something. You don't take anything for granted. Every opportunity, every moment of happiness, you've earned it. I fell in love with him that night, completely and irrevocably. By the time he proposed 2 years later, I had finished my master's degree and was working as an assistant curator at the city's art museum. Marcus was struggling financially. Medical school was expensive and his family couldn't help much. His parents were immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities, but they were still paying off his undergraduate loans. I can't ask you to marry me when I can't even buy you the ring you deserve, he said one evening, his voice thick with frustration. Marcus Chen, I said firmly, taking his hands in mine. I don't need a ring. I need you. We're a team, remember? Your dreams are my dreams. When he finally did propose 6 months later with a simple band he'd saved months to buy, I cried, not because of the ring, but because of the note he'd written. To my partner in everything. Thank you for believing in our future when I couldn't see past tomorrow. We married in a simple ceremony with just a few close friends. My trust fund had grown with some smart investments, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. On our wedding night, I handed him an envelope containing a cashier's check for $200,000. What is this? He asked, his hand shaking as he stared at the amount. Your medical school tuition, the rest of it, plus living expenses so you can focus on your studies instead of working nights at the campus clinic. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Ava, this is your inheritance, your security. No, I said, meaning every word. You're my security. We're investing in our future together. That night, he held me like I was made of precious metal, whispering promises of the life we'd build together once he became a doctor. He promised we'd travel, that he'd buy me the art studio I'd always dreamed of, that he'd spend the rest of his life making sure I never regretted believing in him. Looking back now, I can see that was the night I signed my own death warrant. Not literally, but the death of the woman I used to be. The woman who believed that love and sacrifice were always reciprocated, that investing in someone's dreams guaranteed your place in their future. I gave him everything that night, and eventually, he took it all. The sacrifices began small, almost imperceptible. Marcus needed more time to study, so I took over all the household responsibilities. He needed quiet during his rotations, so I started wearing headphones when I worked on my own projects at home. He needed to attend medical conferences and networking events, so I used my vacation days from the museum to cover his absence and keep our life running smoothly. You're amazing, Ava, he would say, kissing my forehead as I packed his suitcase for another conference. I don't know how I got so lucky. I lived for those moments of appreciation, those glimpses of the grateful, loving man I had married. By his 3rd year, the financial pressure intensified despite my initial contribution. Medical school was more expensive than we had calculated, especially with the additional costs of clinical rotations, medical equipment, and board exam fees. The $200,000 I had given him was nearly depleted, and Marcus was becoming increasingly stressed about money. I might have to take out more loans, he said one evening, slumped over his anatomy books. The interest rates are killer, but I don't see another option. I looked around our apartment, mentally calculating what we had of value. My grandmother's jewelry, a collection of vintage pieces she had left me, sat in a safe deposit box, untouched since her death. They were beautiful, historically significant pieces that I had planned to pass down to my own children someday. But watching Marcus's shoulders slump with defeat, I made a decision. What if we didn't need loans? I asked quietly. He looked up, hope flickering in his tired eyes. What do you mean? The next week, I met with a jewelry appraiser and then an auction house specialist. My grandmother's collection was worth more than I had imagined, $75,000 for the complete set. It was enough to cover Marcus's remaining tuition and provide a cushion for his final year expenses. When I told him what I had done, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Ava, those were irreplaceable. Your grandmother's jewelry will help the man I love achieve his dreams, I finished. Grandmother would understand. She believed in investing in the people you love. He pulled me into his arms then, and I felt that familiar warmth of being needed, of being essential to someone's success. I promise you, once I'm established in my practice, I'll buy you pieces even more beautiful than those. I don't need jewelry, I said, meaning it. I need you to succeed. But the jewelry wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a pattern that would define the next 4 years of our marriage. When Marcus needed to relocate for a prestigious surgical residency application, I quit my job at the museum, a position I loved and had worked years to achieve, and we moved across the state. It's just temporary, Marcus assured me. Once I'm accepted into the program, you can find something even better here. The museum position I found in our new city paid significantly less and had no possibility for advancement, but I took it anyway. We needed the income, and Marcus's schedule was too demanding for him to work. When he needed expensive surgical instruments and textbooks for his rotations, I picked up freelance consulting work, staying up late to write catalog descriptions and exhibition proposals after my regular job. The money went directly to his educational expenses. When he wanted to attend an international medical conference in Switzerland, an opportunity that could change everything for his career, I withdrew money from my retirement fund to pay for his airfare and accommodation. He was gone for 10 days, during which I worked double shifts to cover our rent and living expenses. This conference was incredible, Ava, he told me when he returned, his eyes bright with excitement. I made connections with some of the top surgeons in the world. Dr. Rodriguez from Madrid said my research proposal was groundbreaking. I smiled and listened as he told me about the sessions he'd attended, the renowned doctors he'd met, the opportunities that might open up for him. I didn't mention that I had eaten ramen noodles for 8 of the 10 days he was gone to make sure we could pay our bills. By his final year, I had become an expert at creative financing. I took out a second mortgage on the condo we had bought with the remainder of my trust fund. I sold my car and took the bus to work, telling Marcus I preferred the environmental benefits of public transportation. I canceled our vacation to Italy that we had been planning for 2 years, redirecting the money to pay for his medical board exams and licensing fees. Once I graduate and start my residency, I'll make it all up to you, Marcus promised. We'll take that trip to Italy, plus Paris, plus anywhere else you want to go. You've sacrificed so much for us, Ava. I'll never forget that. I believed him completely. Every sacrifice felt like an investment in our shared future. Every dollar spent on his education was a dollar invested in our marriage. I imagined the life we would have once he was an established surgeon, the house we would buy, the family we would start, the security we would finally have after years of struggle. What I didn't know was that while I was sacrificing everything for us, Marcus was busy planning a future that didn't include me. What I didn't know was that Dr. Rodriguez from Madrid had a daughter, a brilliant young resident named Isabella, who had been at that conference in Switzerland. A woman who represented everything Marcus thought he deserved now that he was about to become Dr. Marcus Chen: beauty, medical connections, and a family with influence in the international medical community. What I didn't know was that my husband was already choosing his new life, and I wasn't in it. But I would learn all of this soon enough, and when I did, every dollar I had spent, every sacrifice I had made, every piece of my former self I had given away, would transform from acts of love into weapons of revenge. The first sign that something had changed wasn't dramatic. It was the absence of something that had always been there. Marcus stopped saying "we" when he talked about the future. When I finish my residency, I'll be able to specialize in cardiac surgery, he would say during dinner, his eyes focused somewhere beyond me. We'll finally be able to start that family we've talked about, I would respond, trying to draw his attention back to our shared dreams. Maybe, he would say vaguely, already reaching for his phone to check messages. I need to focus on establishing my career first. It was subtle, this linguistic shift from partnership to individuality, But I noticed because I had become an expert at reading Marcus's moods and needs over the past 6 years. I had learned to anticipate what he required before he even asked. Quiet when he was studying, encouragement when he doubted himself, space when he was overwhelmed, and celebration when he succeeded. But suddenly, my carefully calibrated support system seemed to annoy him. "You don't need to pack my lunch every morning, Ava," he said one Tuesday, his tone sharper than usual. "I'm not a child." "I know you're not," I replied carefully, unsure where this was coming from. "I just thought it would save you time. I can manage my own time now. I'm about to be a doctor." The emphasis on "I" stung, but I pushed the feeling down. Marcus was under enormous pressure in his final year. The board exams, the residency applications, the constant stress of maintaining perfect grades. It was natural that he might be more irritable than usual, but the irritability began extending to everything I did. When I suggested we spend a quiet evening together watching a movie, he complained that I was being clingy. When I gave him space to study with his classmates, he accused me of being distant and unsupportive. When I tried to discuss our future plans, where we might live after his residency, whether we should start looking at houses, he said I was putting too much pressure on him. "Can't you just let me get through graduation first before you start planning the rest of our lives?" He snapped one evening when I had brought up the possibility of starting a family in the next few years. "Our lives," I repeated quietly. "I thought that's what marriage was, planning our lives together." He softened slightly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Of course it is, baby. I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. Once I graduate and get into a good residency program, we'll sit down and plan everything properly. I promise." I wanted to believe him, but there were other changes that were harder to explain away. Marcus had always been affectionate, holding my hand when we walked, pulling me close while we watched television, kissing me goodbye in the morning. But physical affection became increasingly rare. He claimed he was too tired, too distracted, too focused on his studies. Our intimacy, both physical and emotional, dwindled to almost nothing. He started working later at the hospital, coming home after I was already asleep. When I asked about his day, his responses were brief and generic. "Fine, busy, nothing interesting happened." The man who used to tell me about every patient, every procedure, every small victory and frustration, had become a stranger who shared nothing. His phone habits changed too. Marcus had never been secretive about his phone before. He would answer texts in front of me, take calls on speaker, even ask me to respond to messages when his hands were busy. But suddenly, his phone was always face down, always password protected, always in his pocket or his hand. "Who's texting you so late?" I asked one night when his phone buzzed repeatedly while we were having dinner, one of the few meals we still shared. "Just study group stuff," he said quickly, silencing the phone without looking at it. "You know how it is. People have questions about the boards." But I noticed he checked the messages later in the bathroom, and when he came out, he was smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. The final crack appeared when I discovered he was lying about where he spent his time. Marcus had told me he was attending a study session with his surgical rotation group on a Saturday evening. I decided to surprise him with coffee and snacks, knowing the group usually worked late into the night. But when I arrived at the library where he said they were meeting, the building was closed. I tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I waited in the parking lot for an hour, confused and increasingly worried. When he finally came home at midnight, I was sitting on the couch, still in the clothes I had worn to bring him coffee. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Study group ran late," he said without looking at me, heading straight for the bathroom. "We ended up going to Jake's apartment instead. I went to the library to bring you coffee. It was closed." He stopped walking, his back still to me. For a moment, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. "We started at the library, then moved to Jake's," he said finally. "I must have forgotten to text you about the change. It was plausible. It could have been true, but something in his voice, something in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, told me it wasn't." That night, lying in bed beside my husband who pretended to be asleep, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out what was really happening to my marriage. The next morning, while Marcus was at the hospital, I did something I had never done in 7 years together. I looked through his things. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Evidence of another woman, signs of some crisis I wasn't aware of, anything that would explain the stranger my husband had become. What I found was worse than I had imagined, and not what I expected at all. Hidden in his desk drawer, underneath old medical journals, was a folder labeled Post-Graduation Plans. Inside were printed emails about apartment rentals in different cities, research on exclusive medical practices, and a handwritten list of things to handle after graduation. My name was on that list, second from the bottom, with a single word written next to it. Ava, discuss. I was a task to be handled, a problem to be addressed after graduation. That's when I knew with absolute certainty that my marriage was over, even if Marcus hadn't told me yet. But I also knew something he didn't. I wasn't going to wait around to be handled. The private investigator's office smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. Richard Moss was exactly what I had expected, middle-aged, slightly rumpled, with the weary eyes of a man who had seen too many marriages dissolve in his cramped downtown office. What I hadn't expected was how easily the words would come when he asked me why I was there. I think my husband is having an affair, I said simply. I need to know for certain. How long have you suspected? Richard asked, his pen poised over a yellow legal pad. 3 months, maybe longer. I realized that admitting it out loud made it more real, more painful. He's been different, distant, lying about where he is. Richard nodded with the understanding of someone who had heard this story countless times. What kind of evidence are you looking for? Some people just want confirmation. Others need documentation for divorce proceedings. I want to know everything, I said firmly. Who she is, how long it's been going on, where they meet, everything. What I didn't tell Richard was that I had already done some investigating on my own. I had started paying attention to Marcus's patterns, noting when he came home late, when his stories didn't add up, when he was unusually happy or unusually guilty. I had checked our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants I had never been to, purchases at stores I didn't recognize. Most tellingly, I had found a receipt in his jacket pocket from an expensive jewelry store. A receipt for a diamond necklace that cost more than my monthly salary and that I had never received. Richard worked quickly. Within 2 weeks, he had compiled a file that shattered what remained of my illusions about my marriage. Her name was Isabella Rodriguez, and she was everything I wasn't. 26 years old, stunning in an effortless way that suggested good genes and expensive grooming. She was a surgical resident at the same hospital where Marcus was completing his final rotations, the daughter of Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez, the internationally renowned cardiac surgeon Marcus had met in Switzerland. The photographs Richard had taken made me physically ill. Marcus and Isabella, having lunch at an upscale restaurant, his hand covering hers across the table. Marcus and Isabella entering her apartment building, his arm around her waist in a gesture of intimate familiarity. Marcus and Isabella shopping together, him carrying bags from stores that sold clothes far more expensive than anything in my wardrobe. But the most devastating photo was the last one. Marcus and Isabella in what appeared to be a hotel room, visible through an open curtain. They weren't doing anything explicitly sexual, but the intimacy was unmistakable. She was wearing the diamond necklace from the receipt I had found, and nothing else. Marcus was looking at her with an expression I recognized. The same look of adoration he had given me 7 years ago when we first met. How long? I asked Richard, staring at the photos spread across his desk. Based on what I've been able to determine, about 8 months. It started around the time of that medical conference in Switzerland you mentioned. 8 months. While I had been working extra hours to pay for his board exam fees, he had been building a relationship with another woman. While I had been planning our future together, he had been planning his future without me. There's more, Richard said carefully. The financial investigation you requested turned up some interesting information. He handed me another folder, this one containing bank statements and financial records. Marcus had been siphoning money from our joint account, small amounts at first, but increasing over the past few months. The money had gone into a separate account I didn't know existed, an account he was apparently using to fund his relationship with Isabella. He's been planning this for a while, Richard said gently. The separate account, the apartment lease he signed in another city where he applied for residency, the investment in Isabella's family's medical practice. This isn't a sudden impulse. This is a calculated transition. Investment in Isabella's family's medical practice. My husband was using money I had earned, money we had saved together for our future, to buy his way into his new life. But the worst revelation was yet to come. There's something else you should know, Richard said, his expression grave. Isabella Rodriguez isn't just any resident. Her family is extremely well connected in the medical community. Her father is on the boards of several major hospitals, her uncle is the dean of a prestigious medical school, and her mother is a prominent medical researcher. Dating Isabella isn't just about love for Marcus, it's about career advancement. The room seemed to spin as the full picture became clear. Marcus wasn't just leaving me for another woman, he was leaving me for a better version of the life I had helped him build. Isabella could offer him professional connections I never could, social status I would never possess, and entry into a world where he would be not just Dr. Marcus Chen, but Dr. Marcus Chen, member of the Rodriguez medical dynasty. I had funded his education, supported his dreams, and sacrificed my own ambitions so he could become the kind of man who was worthy of someone like Isabella Rodriguez. I had literally paid for him to outgrow me. "What do you want to do with this information?" Richard asked. I stared at the photos scattered across his desk, evidence of my husband's betrayal, proof of the end of everything I thought I knew about my life. But instead of the crushing despair I had expected to feel, something else was rising in my chest, something cold and sharp and focused. "I want more," I said quietly. "More information. More everything. I want to know about their plans, their timeline, their vulnerabilities. I want to know about Isabella's family, their business dealings, their reputation in the medical community. I want to know everything there is to know about the life my husband thinks he's going to have." Richard raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of investigation. It's going to be expensive." I thought about the years of sacrifice, the sold jewelry, the depleted savings, the second mortgage on our home. I thought about the trust fund I had emptied to pay for his education and the retirement money I had withdrawn to fund his conference attendance. I thought about every dollar I had invested in a man who was already planning his exit strategy. "Bill me," I said, standing up and gathering the photos. "And Richard, I want to know when they're planning to go public with their relationship. Specifically, I want to know about any plans they might have for his graduation ceremony." Richard nodded, understanding flickering in his experienced eyes. "You're planning something." "I'm planning everything," I said. "Marcus thinks he can just discard me now that I've served my purpose. He's about to learn that the woman who was smart enough to put him through medical school is smart enough to destroy the future he thinks he's stolen from me." I walked out of Richard's office with a briefcase full of evidence and a heart full of cold fury. Marcus wanted to play games. He had chosen the wrong opponent. The morning of Marcus's graduation dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect spring weather that seemed to mock my inner turmoil. I had spent the previous night lying awake, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, soon to be just my bedroom, running through everything I knew about what was going to happen today. Thanks to Richard's continued surveillance, I knew Marcus's plans down to the minute. He would attend the graduation ceremony alone, telling me he had only one ticket and that it was just a boring ceremony anyway. He would meet Isabella immediately afterward for photographs in the university gardens. They would attend the exclusive graduation dinner together, where he would introduce her to his professors and classmates as his girlfriend. Finally, they would go to the graduation ball, the event I had helped plan and partially funded through the Alumni Association, where he would dance with her in front of everyone who knew me, everyone who had watched me support him through 7 years of medical school. But Marcus had made a crucial error in his planning. He had underestimated the woman he was betraying. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing an outfit that looked appropriately celebratory but professional, a navy blue dress with pearls, the kind of ensemble that would photograph well. Because regardless of Marcus's plans, I was going to be at his graduation. He just didn't know it yet. At 8 a.m. I received the text I had been expecting, leaving early to meet with some professors before the ceremony. "Don't wait up for me tonight. There are a bunch of celebration events. Love you. Love you." The ease with which he lied was breathtaking. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway, then made 3 phone calls. The first was to Dr. Patricia Williams, the Dean of Student Affairs at the medical school. Dr. Williams and I had worked together on several alumni fundraising events, and she knew me as the devoted wife who had been instrumental in organizing graduation celebrations and donation drives. "Patricia, it's Ava Chen. I have a rather unusual request, and I hope you can help me." "Of course, dear. What can I do for you?" "Marcus has been acting very strangely about his graduation ceremony today. He told me there was only one ticket available, but I suspect he's planning some kind of surprise for me. You know how he is about grand gestures." The lie came smoothly, rehearsed. "I was hoping I could get a seat so I can surprise him back. I've been such a huge part of his journey through medical school, and I'd hate to miss this moment." Dr. Williams was immediately sympathetic. "Oh, how sweet. Of course, we can arrange a seat for you. In fact, let me put you in the VIP section with the other spouses and family members. After everything you've contributed to our programs over the years, it's the least we can do." The second call was to my lawyer, confirming that the divorce papers were ready and that the process servers would be in position. The third call was to Channel 7 News. "Hi, this is Ava Chen. I spoke with your assignment editor yesterday about a story involving medical school fraud and embezzlement that would be breaking today." "Yes. I have additional information that your reporters will want for the follow-up story." I arrived at the graduation venue early, taking my seat in the VIP section with a clear view of both the stage and the audience. I had a perfect vantage point to watch Marcus as he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the diploma I had paid for with my inheritance, my grandmother's jewelry, my retirement fund, and 7 years of my life. When Marcus's name was called, I stood and applauded with everyone else, smiling and nodding at the other spouses and family members around me. "That's my husband," I said proudly to the woman sitting next to me. "I'm so proud of all his hard work." What I didn't say was that it was the last time I would ever call him my husband. After the ceremony, I positioned myself strategically near the exit, watching as Marcus searched the crowd with barely concealed anxiety. He was looking for Isabella, but his eyes passed right over me. Even when we were just 20 feet apart, he was so focused on his new life that he didn't notice his old one standing right there. I followed him at a distance as he made his way to the university gardens, where Isabella was waiting in a flowing yellow dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. I watched from behind a tree as they embraced, as he spun her around, as they posed for photographs that would probably end up on social media within the hour. "You look beautiful," I heard him say to her, his voice carrying the same tenderness he had once reserved for me. "I'm so proud of you, Dr. Chen," she replied, reaching up to straighten his graduation cap. "My parents are going to love the news." The news. They hadn't just been planning to go public today. They had been planning to announce their engagement. I pulled out my phone and called Richard. "Are your photographers in position for the dinner and the ball?" "Already there," he confirmed. "We'll have documentation of everything." "Good. And the other matter we discussed? The financial forensics expert will have her report ready by tomorrow morning. We found some very interesting discrepancies in the research grant applications and the medical school scholarship funds. Your husband has been busy." I smiled grimly. Marcus thought he was clever, but he had left a trail of financial impropriety that would destroy his medical career before it even began. The graduation dinner was a torture I inflicted on myself by choice. I sat at the back of the restaurant's private dining room, hidden behind a pillar but able to see everything. Marcus introduced Isabella to his professors as the woman I'm going to marry, accepting congratulations and toasts while I documented every moment on my phone. But the real performance came at the graduation ball. The hotel ballroom was elegantly decorated with flowers I had helped select as part of the alumni planning committee. The band was playing music I had helped choose. The champagne being served was from a vineyard I had recommended. I had helped create the perfect setting for my own humiliation. Marcus and Isabella made a stunning couple as they danced, her silver dress catching the light with every turn. They moved together with the confidence of people who believed they had gotten away with something, who thought they had successfully executed a plan that would give them everything they wanted without consequences. They had no idea that their picture was being taken by reporters, who would soon be asking very different questions than the ones they expected to answer. They had no idea that the financial records currently being analyzed would reveal a pattern of theft and fraud that would make headlines across the city. Most importantly, they had no idea that in exactly 12 hours, their perfect new life would implode in the most spectacular and public way possible. I left the ball early, but not before leaving a gift on their table. An envelope containing copies of all the photographs Richard had taken, along with a simple note. "Congratulations on your graduation, Marcus. See you both in the morning. Your wife." Sunday morning arrived with an unusual quiet. Marcus hadn't come home from his graduation celebrations, confirming what I already knew. He had spent the night with Isabella. His absence should have hurt, but instead, it felt like freedom. For the first time in months, I could think clearly without having to navigate around his lies and deceptions. I sat in our kitchen with my laptop, 3 cups of coffee, and the comprehensive files Richard had compiled. Spread across the dining table were financial records, photographs, legal documents, and a timeline of Marcus's relationship with Isabella that stretched back 8 months. But now I was looking for something more than evidence of infidelity. I was looking for weaknesses. The first thing I discovered was that Isabella Rodriguez was not quite the perfect princess Marcus thought he was getting. According to Richard's research, she had been engaged twice before, both times to doctors, both engagements ending abruptly when she found better opportunities. One of her former fiancés had accused her of stealing research data from his project and presenting it as her own at a medical conference. The accusation had been quietly settled out of court with a substantial payout from the Rodriguez family. The second discovery was even more interesting. The Rodriguez family's medical practice, the one Marcus was so eager to join, was currently under investigation by the state medical board for billing irregularities. Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez had a history of inflating procedures and charges, and there were rumors that he had been selling prescription drugs to non-patients. It wasn't public knowledge yet, but it would be soon. Marcus, in his eagerness to join the Rodriguez dynasty, was walking into a legal and professional nightmare. But the most damaging discovery came when I cross-referenced the dates of Marcus's relationship with Isabella against his medical school financial records. My brilliant husband had been doing more than just cheating on me. He had been committing fraud. The research grant he had received for his final year project included a stipulation that he was married and that his spouse had sacrificed financially to support his education. The grant was specifically designed to help medical students whose families had made significant sacrifices. Marcus had not only lied on the application by claiming to be in a stable marriage, but he had used grant money meant for our household expenses to fund his relationship with Isabella. That was theft. That was fraud. And that was going to destroy his medical career before it even began. I picked up my phone and called the one person who could help me turn this information into a weapon. Sarah, it's Ava Chen. I need your help with something, and it's going to require all of your investigative journalism skills. Sarah Martinez had been my roommate in college and was now an investigative reporter for the city's largest newspaper. She specialized in uncovering corruption and fraud, particularly in professional and academic settings. We had stayed close over the years, and she knew about my situation with Marcus, though not the full extent of his betrayal. Ava, I was wondering when you'd call. I heard through the grapevine that Marcus graduated yesterday. How are you celebrating? Actually, Sarah, I'm not celebrating. I'm planning Marcus's downfall, and I think you're going to want to be the reporter who breaks this story. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What are you talking about? I spent the next 2 hours walking Sarah through everything I had discovered. The affair, the financial fraud, the stolen grant money, the Rodriguez family's legal troubles, and Marcus's calculated plan to abandon the wife who had funded his entire medical education. Jesus, Ava, Sarah said when I finished. This is bigger than just a cheating husband story. This is medical school fraud, grant theft, and potentially a whole network of corruption involving the Rodriguez family. How much documentation do you have? Everything. Bank records, photographs, recorded conversations, grant applications, financial forensics reports, everything needed to prove every allegation. And you want me to publish this? I want you to publish this in a way that will destroy Marcus's medical career and expose the Rodriguez family for what they are. I want them to face consequences for their actions. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Ava, are you sure about this? Once this story breaks, there's no going back. Marcus will never be able to practice medicine, and the Rodriguez family will be finished in this city. This isn't just revenge. This is professional and social annihilation. Sarah, I said calmly, do you know what I discovered when I went through our financial records in detail? Marcus stole over $300,000 from me over the course of our marriage. Money from my trust fund, money from my inheritance, money from my retirement accounts, money he took to fund his affair and buy his way into Isabella's family. He didn't just cheat on me. He robbed me blind and planned to leave me with nothing while he started a new life with money I had earned. Holy shit. So yes, I'm sure. I want to destroy them both, and I want to do it in the most public, humiliating way possible. We spent the rest of Sunday planning the media strategy. Sarah would publish the initial expose in Tuesday's paper, giving her Monday to verify sources and prepare for the legal challenges that would inevitably follow. I would hold a press conference on Tuesday afternoon to provide additional details and answer questions. But that was just the beginning. I called Dr. Williams at the medical school to schedule an emergency meeting about irregularities I had discovered in Marcus's financial aid applications. I called the state medical board to report suspected grant fraud. I called the district attorney's office to report suspected theft and embezzlement. By Monday morning, I had set in motion a series of investigations and legal actions that would ensure Marcus's medical career was over before it began, but I saved the most satisfying call for last. Richard, it's Ava. I need you to serve divorce papers to Marcus, but I want it done in a very specific way. Can your process server be at the hospital where he's supposed to start his residency orientation today? Of course. What's the timing? I want him served right in front of his new colleagues and supervisors. I want everyone to see him receive divorce papers alleging fraud, theft, and adultery. I want his first day as Dr. Marcus Chen to be the day his entire life falls apart. Consider it done. Anything else? I looked around the apartment that I had furnished and maintained, while Marcus pursued his dreams, the apartment I would now be able to keep, thanks to the evidence of his theft. I thought about the woman I had been when I first met Marcus, trusting, generous, devoted to building a life with someone I loved. That woman was gone, destroyed by a man who had seen her devotion as weakness and her sacrifices as entitlement. The woman who remained was someone Marcus had never met, someone he had inadvertently created through his own betrayal. She was calculating, ruthless, and absolutely committed to making sure that anyone who tried to destroy her would face consequences they never saw coming. Actually, Richard, there is one more thing. I want you to send copies of all our evidence to Isabella's previous fiancés, the ones she discarded when better opportunities came along. I have a feeling they're going to be very interested in learning about her latest victim. You're thorough, Mrs. Chen. I'll give you that. I'm not Mrs. Chen anymore, I said firmly. From now on, it's Ms. Thompson. And yes, I'm very thorough. Marcus is about to learn exactly how thorough. Monday morning brought unexpected gifts. While I was preparing for what I knew would be the most important day of my life, 3 separate phone calls revealed that Marcus's problems were far more extensive than even I had realized. The first call came from Dr. Williams at the medical school. Ava, I need to speak with you urgently about the meeting you requested. We've been conducting our own investigation based on some anonymous tips we received over the weekend, and what we've found is deeply troubling. What kind of investigation? I asked, though I suspected I knew where this was heading. Financial irregularities in Marcus's records going back 3 years. It appears that he may have been systematically defrauding multiple grant programs and scholarship funds. The amounts involved are substantial, possibly in excess of $200,000. I felt a cold satisfaction. Marcus had been even greedier than I had realized. The second call came from Sarah at the newspaper. Ava, you're not going to believe what my research team found when we started digging into the Rodriguez family. Isabella's father isn't just under investigation for billing fraud. He's been running what amounts to a medical diploma mill. Foreign students pay him enormous sums to get fast-tracked through residency programs without meeting the actual requirements. Isabella has been his primary recruiter, targeting ambitious young doctors who are willing to pay for shortcuts to success. Are you saying Marcus was recruited as a victim or as a participant? Both, it looks like. They targeted him because of his academic record and his financial desperation. But once they realized he was willing to commit fraud to maintain his relationship with Isabella, they brought him into the scheme. We found evidence that Marcus helped falsify medical records for at least 6 other students in exchange for guaranteed placement in their cardiac surgery program. My husband wasn't just a cheater and a thief. He was part of a criminal conspiracy that had potentially put unqualified doctors into positions where they could harm patients. The third call came from my lawyer. Ava, the process server reached Marcus at the hospital this morning, and apparently it didn't go well. According to witnesses, Marcus became extremely agitated when he was served with the divorce papers in front of his new colleagues. He started shouting about how you were trying to ruin his life, and he made some very specific threats about what he would do to you. What kind of threats? Threatening enough that the hospital security office has filed a report with the police. Marcus has been suspended from his residency program pending an investigation, and there's a temporary restraining order being issued to keep him away from you. I hung up the phone with a mixture of satisfaction and genuine fear. Marcus was losing everything, exactly as I had planned, but desperate people do desperate things. I needed to be careful. That afternoon, I met Sarah at a downtown coffee shop to review the final version of the story that would be published the next morning. The article was devastating. A comprehensive exposé of medical fraud that implicated not just Marcus and Isabella, but an entire network of corrupt medical professionals. The headline is, "Local Medical School Graduation Scandal Exposes Multi-million-dollar Fraud Ring," Sarah explained, showing me the layout on her laptop. Marcus and Isabella are featured prominently, but they're clearly presented as part of a larger criminal enterprise. I studied the article, marveling at how thoroughly Sarah had documented everything. There were quotes from Marcus's former classmates describing his suspicious spending habits, statements from patients who had been treated by unqualified residents in the Rodriguez program, and financial records showing the flow of money between various participants in the scheme. What about Isabella's previous victims? I asked. 2 of them agreed to go on the record. Dr. Stephen Walsh from Philadelphia and Dr. Michael Torres from Boston both described nearly identical patterns. Isabella would seduce them, gain access to their research and financial resources, then disappear when better opportunities arose. Both men lost significant amounts of money, and, in Torres's case, credit for breakthrough research that Isabella subsequently published under her own name. And the Rodriguez family's reaction? They've lawyered up completely. No one in the family is talking to reporters, but their legal team is already threatening to sue anyone who publishes these allegations. Let them try, I said firmly. We have documentation for everything. That evening, as I was preparing for what I knew would be a media firestorm, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang at 8 p.m., and when I looked through the peephole, I saw Isabella Rodriguez standing on my doorstep. She looked different from the confident, radiant woman I had seen in the surveillance photos. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing jeans and a simple sweater rather than the designer clothes I was used to seeing in pictures. Most tellingly, she looked frightened. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "What do you want, Isabella?" "Mrs. Chen, I need to talk to you, please." There are things about Marcus that you don't understand, things that put both of us in danger. Despite every instinct telling me to slam the door in her face, curiosity won. I let her in, keeping my phone ready to call 911 if necessary. Isabella sat on the edge of my couch, her hands shaking as she spoke. Marcus isn't who you think he is. He isn't who I thought he was either. When my family started investigating his background more thoroughly, for security reasons, because of our medical practice, we found things that scared us. What kind of things? His medical school records were falsified, not just the financial aid applications. His entire academic record, the grades, the clinical evaluations, even some of his board exam scores. Marcus has been living a lie for years, and he's been getting increasingly desperate to keep it hidden. I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. Are you saying he's not qualified to be a doctor? I'm saying I don't know what he's qualified to do, but it isn't practice medicine. And when my father tried to back out of the arrangement to bring Marcus into our practice, Marcus threatened to expose our family's irregularities unless we honored our agreement. So he's been blackmailing your family. Yes. And now that your divorce is becoming public, and with the newspaper investigation, Marcus is completely panicked. He called me this morning and said that if he was going down, he was taking everyone with him, including you. A chill ran down my spine. What did he mean by that? He has evidence of things you've been doing. The private investigator, the financial surveillance, the media contacts. He's planning to claim that you've been harassing and stalking him, that you've been interfering with his career out of spite. But more than that, he's been documenting things about you that could be taken out of context. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. These are copies of photos and documents Marcus has been collecting. Some of them show you following him. Some show you meeting with reporters and investigators. Taken together, they could make you look like a dangerously obsessed wife who's been systematically trying to destroy her husband's life. I looked through the folder, recognizing pictures of myself that I hadn't known were being taken. Marcus had been conducting his own surveillance operation, building a case to paint me as the villain in our story. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Isabella looked directly at me for the first time since she'd arrived. Because I've been where you are. I've been the woman who sacrificed everything for a man who turned out to be a lie. And because Marcus Chen is dangerous in ways that neither of us fully understood until it was almost too late. What do you mean, dangerous? I mean that tomorrow, when this story breaks, Marcus is going to try to destroy you in ways you haven't anticipated. And if he can't destroy you legally, he might try to destroy you physically. The fear I had been suppressing all day suddenly felt very real and very immediate. What do you think I should do? Isabella stood up, heading for the door. I think you should be very, very careful. And I think you should know that whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone in this. Marcus has made more enemies than just you, and some of us are willing to fight back. After she left, I sat in my living room holding the folder of surveillance photos Marcus had taken of me, realizing that the man I had been married to for 7 years was a complete stranger. Tomorrow's newspaper expose was going to destroy his life, but he was planning to take me down with him. The game had just become far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Tuesday morning arrived like the calm before a hurricane. I woke up at 5 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because I couldn't sleep. Today was the day everything I had been planning for weeks would finally come to fruition. Today was the day Marcus would discover that the quiet, supportive wife he had discarded was capable of orchestrating his complete destruction. The first edition of the Morning Herald hit newsstands at 6 a.m. Sarah's article was front-page news, with the headline, "Medical School Fraud Scandal Rocks Prestigious University," in bold letters above photographs of Marcus and Isabella at the graduation ball. The story was even more damaging than I had hoped, presenting a comprehensive investigation into corruption that reached far beyond my personal situation. By 7 a.m., my phone was ringing constantly. Local TV stations wanting interviews, other newspapers requesting follow-up information, and calls from people I hadn't heard from in years who had seen the news. But the call I had been waiting for came at 7:30 a.m. "Ava, this is Detective Rodriguez from the Fraud Division. We've been reviewing the information you provided to our office, and we'd like to meet with you this morning to discuss pressing charges." "I'll be there within the hour," I replied. But before I left for the police station, I had one more phone call to make. "Richard, is everything in position for the press conference?" "Absolutely. The hotel conference room is booked. I've confirmed attendance from 6 different news outlets, and I have copies of all the documentation ready for distribution." "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m., but the real show started much earlier. At 10 a.m., Marcus was arrested at the hospital, where he had been trying to salvage his suspended residency. According to the news reports I watched from the police station, he was taken into custody on charges of grant fraud, embezzlement, and theft, all stemming from the evidence I had provided. The footage showed him being led away in handcuffs while his former colleagues watched in shock. At 11 a.m., federal agents raided the Rodriguez family medical practice. Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez was arrested on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and running an illegal medical credential scheme. Isabella was taken in for questioning as a potential co-conspirator. At noon, the medical school held an emergency press conference announcing that Marcus's degree was being revoked and that they were conducting a comprehensive review of their financial aid programs to prevent future fraud. By 1 p.m., the story had gone national. CNN was running updates on their news ticker, and social media was exploding with commentary about the medical school scandal that had exposed corruption in one of the country's most prestigious medical programs. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. The press conference I held at 2 p.m. was standing room only. Reporters from local and national outlets packed the hotel conference room, cameras rolling as I walked to the podium. I was wearing the same navy blue dress I had worn to Marcus's graduation ceremony, a deliberate choice that several photographers would later note in their articles. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. My name is Ava Thompson, and I am the soon-to-be ex-wife of Marcus Chen, the man at the center of the medical fraud scandal that was reported in this morning's Herald. I paused, looking out at the sea of cameras and reporters, feeling a surge of power I had never experienced before. For 7 years, I funded my husband's medical education with money from my trust fund, my inheritance, and my retirement savings. I worked 3 jobs to support us while he went to school. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay his tuition. I took out a second mortgage on our home to cover his expenses. I sacrificed my own career opportunities and my financial security because I believed I was investing in our shared future. The room was completely silent, except for the clicking of camera shutters. What I discovered 3 months ago was that my husband had been systematically stealing from our joint accounts to fund an affair with Isabella Rodriguez, the daughter of Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez. But more than that, I discovered that Marcus had been committing fraud against the very institutions I had been helping him succeed in. I held up a thick folder of documents. This folder contains evidence of grant fraud, embezzlement, academic falsification, and participation in a criminal conspiracy to sell medical credentials to unqualified students. These are not allegations. These are documented facts that have been verified by law enforcement and are being prosecuted to the full extent of the law. A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Chen, what motivated you to conduct such an extensive investigation into your own husband? The first motivation was love, I said honestly. When I suspected something was wrong, I hoped I could uncover the truth and save our marriage. But what I found was so much worse than an affair. I found evidence of criminal activity that potentially put patients' lives at risk. At that point, it became about more than my personal situation. It became about justice. Another reporter called out, "What do you want people to know about this situation?" I want people to know that when someone betrays your trust, when they take advantage of your love and generosity, you have the right to seek justice. But more importantly, I want people to understand that Marcus Chen and Isabella Rodriguez were part of a larger criminal enterprise that has been operating for years. There are other victims, other students who were defrauded, other families who were lied to and stolen from. What's next for you personally? I smiled for the first time during the press conference. What's next is that I'm reclaiming my life. The money Marcus stole from me is being recovered through legal action. The house that I paid for is remaining in my name, and the career I put on hold to support his dreams is being resumed. I start work next week as the senior curator at the Metropolitan Museum, a position I was offered after the museum board learned about my situation and my qualifications. The room buzzed with excited murmurs. This was the kind of personal redemption story that would resonate with readers and viewers, but I wasn't finished. There's one more thing I want to share with you all. Something that represents the ultimate irony of this entire situation. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. 3 months ago, around the same time I first suspected Marcus was having an affair, I discovered that I was pregnant. The room erupted with gasps and excited chatter from the reporters. I had been planning to tell Marcus the night of his graduation. I had prepared a special dinner, champagne, and a gift box with baby shoes inside, a surprise that I hoped would mark the beginning of the next chapter of our lives together. I held up the paper so the cameras could see it. This is a paternity test, conducted last week when I realized that the timing of the pregnancy coincided with a period when Marcus was rarely home and we had very little physical contact. The test confirms what I suspected. The child I'm carrying is not Marcus's. The room fell completely silent as reporters tried to process this revelation. The father is Dr. James Mitchell, the private physician who has been providing my medical care during this difficult period. James and I developed a relationship after I discovered Marcus's affair. Unlike my soon-to-be ex-husband, James is a man of integrity who has supported me through the most challenging time of my life. I folded the paper and put it back in my briefcase. So while Marcus was planning his new life with Isabella Rodriguez using money he stole from me, I was actually building a new life of my own, with a man who values honesty, with a career that fulfills me, and with a child who will grow up knowing what real love and commitment look like. The press conference ended with a flurry of questions and camera flashes. By evening, the story had evolved from a medical fraud scandal to a complex tale of betrayal, justice, and redemption that captured national attention. Marcus's surprise had been Isabella at the graduation ball. My surprise was destroying his entire life and rebuilding mine from the ashes. The city had never seen anything quite like it. 3 months later, I stood in the same hotel conference room where I had held the press conference that changed everything. But this time, I was there for a celebration, not an exposé. The Metropolitan Museum was hosting a reception for the opening of my first major exhibition as senior curator: Renaissance Women, Power, Patronage, and Artistic Legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was celebrating Renaissance women who had wielded power behind the scenes, while my own story had become a very public demonstration of what happens when a woman refuses to remain quietly in the background. "Ava, the exhibition is absolutely magnificent," said Dr. Patricia Williams, who had become an unexpected ally after the medical school scandal broke. "You've managed to turn one of the most difficult periods of your life into something beautiful and meaningful." I touched my growing belly, now obviously pregnant at 6 months, and smiled. Sometimes the best art comes from the deepest pain. These women understood that survival often requires complete transformation. The legal aftermath of Marcus's crimes had unfolded exactly as I had hoped. He pled guilty to 12 counts of fraud and embezzlement and was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. His medical degree was permanently revoked, and he was ordered to pay $400,000 in restitution, money that came directly back to me as the primary victim of his theft. Isabella Rodriguez had managed to avoid prison by cooperating fully with federal investigators, but her medical career was over. The Rodriguez family practice was permanently shut down, and Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez was serving a 10-year sentence for his role in the medical credential fraud scheme. Isabella had moved back to Spain, where her family had some remaining connections, but her reputation in the medical community was destroyed. The broader investigation had uncovered a network of fraud that extended to 6 different medical schools and resulted in the arrests of over 30 people. 24 medical licenses were revoked, and several hospitals had to conduct extensive reviews of their residents' qualifications. The scandal led to major reforms in medical school oversight and financial aid verification processes, but the most satisfying outcome was the personal transformation I had undergone. "Excuse me, are you Ava Thompson?" I turned to see a young woman, probably in her early 30s, approaching nervously. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "My name is Rachel Santos. I wanted to thank you for what you did. My ex-husband was a resident in the Rodriguez program, and he put me through something very similar to what you experienced. When your story broke, it gave me the courage to come forward with my own evidence. He's been arrested, and I'm finally getting my life back." Over the past 3 months, I had received dozens of similar messages. Women who had been financially exploited by ambitious men, students who had been victims of academic fraud, patients who had been treated by unqualified doctors, all finding their voices because my story had demonstrated that fighting back was possible. "I'm so glad you found the strength to speak up," I told Rachel. "No one should have to suffer in silence when they've been betrayed and stolen from." As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by people who represented the new life I was building. James Mitchell, the man who had become my partner and the father of my child, was discussing art history with some of the museum board members. Sarah Martinez was interviewing several attendees for a follow-up article about how the medical fraud scandal had led to broader reforms. Richard Moss, my former private investigator who had become a close friend, was proudly telling anyone who would listen how impressed he was with my strategic thinking. But the most meaningful moment came when Dr. Williams approached me near the end of the evening. "Ava, I have something for you," she said, holding out an envelope. "This arrived at the medical school yesterday, addressed to you." I opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter on prison stationery. "Ava, I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. but I wanted you to know that sitting in this cell, I finally understand what I lost when I betrayed you. You gave me everything, your love, your money, your trust, your future, and I threw it all away for something that was never real. Isabella never loved me. She was using me the same way I used you, and I was too arrogant to see it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it because I thought I deserved more than what we had together. I thought I was too good for the woman who made my success possible. I know you're happy now. I've seen the news coverage about your museum position and your new relationship. I'm glad. You deserve happiness with someone who values what you bring to their life. I hope someday you can remember the good times we had before I became someone you couldn't recognize. I hope your child grows up knowing what real love looks like, the kind of love you showed me, even when I didn't deserve it. Marcus. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. There was a time when a letter like this might have broken my heart, or made me question whether I had been too harsh in my revenge. But that woman, the woman who had been willing to sacrifice everything for love, was gone. The woman who remained understood that some betrayals are so complete, so calculated, that they require equally calculated consequences. "How do you feel?" James asked, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. I paused, considering the question seriously. I feel like myself again, maybe for the first time in years. As I looked around the room at the art I had curated, the people I had chosen to include in my life, and the future I was building for my child, I realized that Marcus had actually given me an unexpected gift. His betrayal had forced me to discover strengths I didn't know I possessed, to fight for myself in ways I never had before, to build a life based on my own values and ambitions rather than someone else's dreams. The woman who had met Marcus 7 years ago in the rain outside the medical building would have been destroyed by his betrayal, but the woman I had become, forged by betrayal but tempered by justice, was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more powerful than she had ever imagined possible. 3 weeks later, the story took one final, unexpected turn. I was at home on a Saturday morning, reviewing applications for a new assistant curator position, when James brought me the morning newspaper. "You're going to want to see this," he said, pointing to a small article on page 3. The headline read, "Former medical student dies in prison fight." Marcus Chen, 32, died yesterday at the Federal Correctional Facility, where he was serving a 5-year sentence for medical fraud and embezzlement. According to prison officials, Chen was attacked by another inmate during an altercation in the prison cafeteria. He was pronounced dead at the prison medical facility. I stared at the article for a long moment, waiting to feel something. Sadness, guilt, satisfaction, anything. But all I felt was a strange sense of completion, as if a chapter that had been left unfinished had finally found its ending. Marcus had spent 7 years taking pieces of my life, until there was almost nothing left of the woman I had been. But in the end, his actions had forced me to become someone stronger, someone who refused to be defined by other people's betrayals. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the strong kicks of the child who would grow up hearing the story of how his mother had turned the worst betrayal of her life into the foundation of her greatest triumph. The surprise I had prepared for Marcus hadn't just become news across the city, it had become a story of transformation that would outlive all of us. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming someone so much better than the person who tried to destroy you, that their betrayal becomes the catalyst for your greatest success. Justice served. New beginnings begun. Story complete.